Allison, what do you say we just get started
Let's
and
get started.
a little bit later can do so. So
Absolutely.
hi everyone. I'll just kick this off really briefly, then pass it over to Allison. I'm Lydia. I'm the executive director of the Virginia Club of New York. I am class of 2021. And I basically run all the programming for the Virginia Club, along with our awesome board members and volunteers. Allison and Anthony head up our Who's in Entrepreneurship community of interest. It's an awesome group. They do a lot of really cool programming, both in person and virtual. So super excited to be on this panel and joined by some awesome, very impressive alumni. So just a few really brief tech notes for me. Feel free to turn on your cameras or leave them off if you wish. At any point, feel free to pop in questions into the chat. We'll have a portion, probably the last 15 to 20 minutes or so of Q&A. And at that point, people can raise their hands and actually unmute and, show their faces and stuff if they want to, or we can just pop in the chat. But we'll be trying to get to some of the pre-submitted questions as well. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Allison. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Lydia, and the Virginia Club of New York and the Office of Engagement for helping organize and host and promote this event. And thank you all so much for being here. And of course, to these four amazing panelists. I'm very excited to be having this discussion and sharing these insights with everyone. So as Lydia said, I'm Allison Geller. I'm the co-chair of Who's in Entrepreneurship. So we're a community within the Virginia Club of New York, but also doing a lot of virtual events like this and really meant to bring our UVA alumni and student founder community together. So whatever stage you're at in your entrepreneurial journey, whether you're just starting or you're even just thinking of an idea or you're really going for it, we really like to provide a network and resources, for everyone. So this session is being recorded, so you can kind of sit back and relax. You don't have to worry too much about taking notes because you can always refer to the transcript later. So let's jump in. I'm going to introduce our panelists. Thrilled to be joined, as Lydia said, by four very accomplished and impressive alumni representing different facets of branding and marketing. So we have Kevin Wong. So Kevin is the co-founder of Lunar Hard Seltzer, which is an award-winning craft hard seltzer made with real fruits from Asia. It's really delicious. If you haven't tried it, definitely get on that. He is also, his co-founder, Sean Rowe, is also a UVA alum. So we love seeing that. We have Carmen Collins, who is our, yes, lychee is very good, but they're all really good. I mean, really, who can choose? Carmen Collins, who is our social media expert in the house. She's currently head of social media marketing at QuickBooks. She's also held roles at Wish, Cisco, and other brands, and she's a social media coach as well. So very happy to have her insights on that front. Lots of hot topics there, I know, so we'll try to get to as many as possible. We have Laura Fryer, who's our PR maven in the house, here to talk about all things press. Laura is also a founder. She's the founder of Blue Hominy, an Atlanta-based public relations firm with an emphasis on lifestyle and hospitality. And then we have Omar Garriott, who has led product marketing at 5 tech companies within with a kind of a focus on the education space and market in particular. He's worked at Qualtrics, at Salesforce, at LinkedIn and Apple. So representing kind of the tech side of things, very happy to have him. And of course, he's now back in Charlottesville at Darden. He's executive director of the Batten Institute for Entrepreneurship. So really, really excited to have this really amazing panel. And I'm your moderator. I'm Allison. So I run this community of interest with Anthony, and then I'm also in the branding and marketing space. So I co-founded a marketing and branding agency called G&T Creative. So all these topics are very near and dear to me. I'm very excited to talk about them. So let's just go ahead and jump in. So thank you to everyone who submitted questions beforehand. As Lydia said, if you have a question that occurs to you during this, feel free to pop it in the chat. We'll do our best to get to it. We'll also have some open Q&A at the end, so you can ask live if you'd like to. And we'll do our best to get to everything. I'll just preface this by saying that all of these topics could really be their own panel in themselves. So, we're really just going to scratch the surface, but, we'll do our best to kind of provide some interesting insights to everyone tonight. So I want to start kind of at the beginning, which is talking about branding. So Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you to start things out for us. So you started Lunar with Sean only 2 years ago, so you're pretty close to this kind of branding phase, but you're also going through, of course, a lot of really exciting growth right now. So I wanted to ask, like, how did you originally conceptualize the brand? Like, how did you even think about the name, the logo, the package design, and how has that evolved since then?
Geez, that's like a million questions in one, Allison.
I know, this is what I do, Kevin. I just try to pack everything and you'll get used to it.
Yeah, I guess I'll give a quick background on Lunar. The idea for us came about, my friend and I, we, both UVA class of 2013, we were eating Korean fried chicken, drinking Bud Light, and we were like, wait, why isn't there a drink that like better resonates with who we are, and kind of like, the rest of the world here, for us. And so we, when we thought about the brand, we wanted one that could be broadly Asian American, that was accessible to everyone and could be recognized as a brand that, hey, there is some authenticity with what we're building here. So when we came up with the word Lunar, so this is kind of our can, the name Lunar comes from Lunar New Year, which is like the biggest holiday in most Asian cultures, actually. So we thought that that would be a really nice way to bring multiple cultures together, really to bridge cultures. You can see that there's a few design elements here. Like, for example, the A is not only does this mean people in Chinese, but also it means the letter S for seltzer in the Korean alphabet. So a lot of like small little touches here that people, I think in the beer world, people love looking at, craft beer, right? That's like a thing.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to make sure that we have all of these little Easter eggs for people to discover as they dive into the brand. And if you see here, we even have a mascot. This is the moon rabbit. So there's a folk tale. Basically, what happened is there, in Japanese culture, there is a man on the moon, and he disguised himself as a beggar, came to the earth, and was asking for alms. And there was a fox, there's a rabbit, and there was some other animal, and they like walked by and then gave him stuff. But the rabbit was poor, it had nothing to give, and so offered itself as food to the beggar to eat. And then the beggar transformed back into the man and was like, oh, like very touched by the rabbit's kindness, and immortalized the rabbit on the moon so everyone could like really know that this rabbit was awesome. So that's kind of like the little sneak peek behind here. But for us, having a brand that is supposed to be representative of broadly Asian American culture, we want to make sure that the brand could span multiple different cultures and not really pigeonhole into like, oh, this is a Japanese brand or a Korean brand or an American brand. But this is a brand that people from all over can resonate with.
Yeah, I love that. And I did not know all of that. So that's great. And I love how you came at it with obviously having thought really hard, not just starting with, oh, how do we want this to look, but what is important to us to tell about the story and what is genuinely personally important. And I think that's so important. And I think something a lot of people miss when they're like, oh, okay, well, like what color do I like? Or, how can I sort of like just get a clean logo done as quickly as possible or something. So yeah, how did you actually, that is something that obviously takes, some resources and effort and some money. Like, how did you sort of pull that off at the very beginning?
Yeah, we were pretty scrappy with it. I think, a few lessons learned maybe while we're doing it, but we did the design mostly in-house. And we had a friend of ours who is German Chinese, out of Berlin, recommended to us by another fellow who started a company, actually. So keeping it within the family. But this designer helped us come up with design in the beginning, and with a lot of guidance from us on sharing like, hey, here are the cultural elements that we want to be preserved. And there's also when you come up with branding and design, it's also important to know who you're competing with, right? What like where you're selling, right? Like, and how are consumers going to discover and interact with your product? Like for us, right, in hard seltzer, as you guys know, there's like Truly and there's White Claw and there's Bond, there's a ton of seltzers, but the one thing is that all their can designs are just straight up like blank white cans. It's kind of like pretty generic. And so we knew first and foremost, we can't do that same thing. We needed to have color on the can. And so kind of it's a blend of, having that, we were lucky too. Sean, he has a design background, professional career. So he was able to kind of speak that language with a designer as we kind of brought not only the cultural elements, but like the competitive sets on store shelves. I'm like, here is what we look like on a shelf. How do we make sure it stands out? And by doing surveys like digitally and even in store, like shopper surveys of like, let's put our cans onto the store, like some mock-ups. and watching people as they walk by.
Oh, really
Are their
interesting.
eyes going there? And like that costs a lot of money, as you know, Allison. Like that kind of
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah.
bajillions of dollars. So we just did it on a budget scale, but
You just kind of
it was
like
scrappy.
stuck in there and like stuck your mock-ups in on the shelf.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. That is being scrappy. I know, that's great. So let's talk a little bit, and Carmen, actually, I'd love to get your input on this, and then Kevin, if you have thoughts about this as well. So I wanted to talk a little bit just about social media. So Carmen, maybe you can weigh in a bit on, first of all, as a social media strategist, like how a brand even thinks about a social media strategy from the beginning. So let's say you're working on your brand, or you have your brand and now you're forming that. Do you need to have a strategy versus just posting when you have something to post? Like, how do you even think about that when you're a startup?
I agree with Kevin, but that's a loaded question. I'm going to need another hour and a half. I'm just kidding.
I know.
I put in the
ambitious.
chat, just hearing the story of Lunar. To me, the most compelling part of any brand, the behind the scenes story of any brand is your story. And that's what I think social media is, how it's the most powerful for entrepreneurs and early starts and even mid-sized brands. How do you get your story out? And so that's why I would recommend that you have a strategy. And you don't have to be a social media strategist. You don't have to be a marketer. I don't think anybody starts a business to do the business end of it, right? You're passionate about your product or what you're selling, and the rest of it is surprise. Now you have to think of payroll and other things. But if you just jot down what is going to make someone connect with me as a brand, what is the story? What is the emotional connection? We're all human beings. It doesn't matter what product you're selling. It doesn't matter what service you're selling. You know, we have B2B marketing, business to business, we have business to consumer. Forget all that. It's human to human. We all react to humor. We all react to a sad story. We all react to an inspiring story. So what is your story? And then as part of this, exercise of writing down on a sheet of paper or putting it in your notes on your Mac or however you do this, who's your audience? Really, really think about this, because this is part of any business plan, right? You've already got this someplace in the back of your mind. So who's your audience and where are they? So the good news is that you do not have to be on every social media platform that exists in order to be successful in social media marketing. Think about who you're trying to reach. Do a quick Google search of where that audience lives the most on social media. You'll probably, a quick search will get you multiple links to check out. In general terms, if you're looking for Gen Z and whatever the next generation is called, I can't keep up with this generations anymore. We're just all over the place. If you're looking for 18 to 24, you're going to want to look at TikTok. If you're looking at boomers, you're probably looking at Facebook, right? You just think about who your audience is and where they live. And then as part of that strategy, carve out time. Social is often, or marketing in general is often something that falls off your to-do list.
Sure.
Carve out time. If you're a morning person, make it the first thing you do. If you're a night owl, make it the last thing you do. Carve out that time, a half hour every day, to think about what can I post today to actually do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a type A overachiever. I'm in therapy for it, but I would spend more time at the beginning to plan it out for the week. Other people like to do it, daily. But I think having that just overarching strategy, you don't have to have it as in-depth as I would do it for my brand. Just write it down. What do you want to say? What's your story? Where's your audience? And carve out that time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and in terms of kind of creating the content needed to support that, because I know it can feel really burdensome when you're a small brand, right? To kind of, you're like, okay, well, now I need a video for TikTok every day or whatever. Or like I know, and Kevin, you're like, yeah, I know this is this is a lot, right? Because for you too, you guys are dealing with all of the constant issues and problems, but also exciting work, right? Of actually building a brand that's like product. Like you have all these things and questions and things, right? Always coming up, but then you also have to do this too. So Carmen and Kevin, like, how do you think about just creating the content? Like, what are, the goals you set in terms of how much to create, and how do you make that happen in a way that's reasonable?
Kevin, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go?
I'm cool with whatever. You can go first.
All right, I'll go first. I was hoping you would go so I could think a little bit more about my answer. So again, I don't want anybody to feel overwhelmed by creating social content. You don't have to be everywhere. You don't have to be everything for everyone. Pick where you are going to focus on your audience and make that your priority. So pick one channel. If that channel's not working for you, maybe explore another and see how that goes. But just one channel. And you don't have to be professional. This is not a Super Bowl commercial. This is you letting people into your life. So I'm going to use TikTok as an example because that's the big, shiny thing that everybody is talking about. The best TikToks are like the Blair Witch Project. They're shaky. They're a personal perspective. They're, packing an order. So-and-so in Charlottesville ordered a keychain and a sticker, and here's me putting my special touch bow on top of it and just telling their story as they're doing it. So you don't have to have some big production to it. Just be yourself and talk like you're talking to a friend or your audience.
Yeah.
And so if you think about creating content as just letting people into your life, one, it's going to do better for you. And two, you don't have to feel as overwhelmed or anxiety ridden about it.
Yeah.
Totally. I love that. Yeah. Kevin, what are your thoughts about that? Because I know you guys post a lot of great content like that on Instagram, on TikTok, which I love it. Everyone throw Lunar a follow. But I think you guys have done a really good job with that. So peel back the curtain a little bit for us. Like, how is that for you? And what are kind of the lessons or tips that you've learned along the way?
Yeah, I will say every channel is very different. That's kind of the biggest lesson we've learned. Authentic content generally works really well. People want to see, people are kind of over that fake Instagram life. People kind of want to see what's actually happening, or at least think that they're seeing what's actually happening. So fake authenticity also sells. But at the end of the day, you want, most important is who is looking at your stuff, right? What's the audience you want to reach? Where do they live? As Carmen said, where do they live? And what do I want to make them feel, right? For example, on LinkedIn, our strategy on LinkedIn is who's out there. People on LinkedIn are generally looking to be inspired and to be educated. So that is the content that we post. It is inspirational and it is educational content. Definitely quotable. TikTok, they are looking for also inspiration and education. People want hot takes. That sells really well. So hot takes there, we'll talk about controversial stuff. For example, insert some celebrity said some racist stuff. Here's our take on that. That does really well. I know brands, and we're experimenting with this. We're still learning TikTok for sure, but I know brands that will plant comments on videos and then reply to their planted comments to start.
Wow.
And it does really well. So I don't know. It's every single channel is very interesting. It's all unique. So making sure that you dedicate time to each one is definitely a little bit overwhelming, right? You want to do each channel right. I haven't even touched Twitter. Still a mystery to me. Facebook, we're really good on Facebook for some reason. I think Facebook is, to me, that is our biggest hack. And if you're starting a CPG brand, I would recommend exploring Facebook because similar to Reddit, Facebook has all of these interest groups, right? You can go to Facebook groups. So if you kind of know what audience you're seeking out, you can go there and post relevant content. I'll give you an example. There's a Facebook group called Asian Hustle Network, and it's basically just a huge group of Asian American entrepreneurs. And they are there to learn about each other's stories. And I was like, oh, this sounds like a perfect place for me to make people feel inspired. And so I posted on there and that went viral. That was really good for the business. And so I think at the end of the day, it's, there's product market fit and then there's content audience fit. And I think that is what you're usually seeking when you think about what to do, where to post this. And I would say people also talk a lot, especially on LinkedIn. People love saying post regularly. I kind of disagree with that. I think it works on TikTok. I don't think it works on LinkedIn, because if you just keep posting inane bullshit, people kind of be like, come on, this guy's a fruitcake, like, yo, chill. So I, make sure that your content delivers value to people wherever they are, or makes them feel a certain way and makes them want to engage. So those are like, I think, the two main criteria and the way we view content production for us.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kevin. That's super valuable. And how do you feel like you get over or did it take time to get over what I feel is sort of like the self-consciousness of that, of being like, I'm here on camera and I'm going to talk about this. Like, was that just like, okay, I'm just going to do it enough times, or did you enjoy it from the beginning?
Definitely don't enjoy it. A little bit background on me. I was a professional photographer for quite some time. And so being a photographer, you're behind the camera intentionally, right? Like, I don't really like being in front of the camera. So I'm still working on that. That's definitely a thing for me to overcome. Like, every time I'm like trying in front of the camera, doing things, there's a lot of like, there's a little bit of like, who am I to be talking about this? A little bit of like, oh, I feel nervous. I think the one thing recently that I've been reading a lot about is Beyonce and her whole Sasha Fierce persona, as a way to get outside of her comfort zone, just to embody who she wants to be. So that's work in progress for me, but that was very inspiring for me to read about, kind of like her envisioning the Sasha Fierce personality, so that when she goes on stage, she just transforms into a persona. Like, that is very, very awesome to hear.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's weird. We don't think about it a lot, but you sometimes, like, it helps to think of yourself as creating your own little character. Like, it doesn't have to really be you. It's kind of like the fake authenticity thing. Like, it doesn't have to feel good. It doesn't have to feel like the you that you are at home. And that's actually okay. Right. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, what you mentioned about that Facebook post and that group going viral, because someone did ask this question, which I love the courage of this. Someone just asked how to make content go viral as their question. Good for you. But I think, like, it seems like there isn't one way, right? It's like hard. And Carmen, I'm sure you have experience with this too. Like, maybe something in your time went viral, and did you think it would? Was it like planned? Like, this is the thing, or was there maybe something else where the team was like, oh yeah, this content, like, this is viral, and like it kind of fell flat? Like, how do you know what's gonna achieve that viral, super shareable kind of effect?
I have never had a planned post that I thought would go viral actually go viral. Every single post that has done and when we say viral, we're not talking about millions and millions, and although some cases that works out, it's always the unplanned. And my guess, just from hearing Kevin the last little bit, is because he knew his audience. He posted something that was, I'm going to say authentic. I'm not going to say fake authentic, because even fake authentic, while slightly produced, is still authentic.
Totally.
And it's just, again, something made somebody feel a thing. Make somebody feel a thing. Laughter, sadness, happiness, anxiety, anger. I mean, this is why fake news works so well on social media. It incites some emotion. So I'm going to guess that that's why that went viral for Kevin.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
Make somebody feel something.
I will also say, just add on is, it's something interesting for people to try is post the same content on multiple channels. You'll see that it'll perform better on one or another, because camera home like channel is important.
Yeah.
But also, like, tweaking content. Like, for example, some of the best content creators I know, like, let's say I'll do a 60-minute or like 60-second video for TikTok. That is sliceable up into, quotable tidbits for Twitter, right? Into, thread-based things on Twitter, or even LinkedIn, right? Maybe taking a screen cap of that for Instagram. Like, there's so many different ways to repurpose one piece of thing, but at the end of the day, is making that content native to that channel and that audience.
Yeah.
So you can, like, on the feeling like I need to produce a lot of stuff, I can only, I could spend 30 minutes producing one thing, but then that becomes like 15 different things by the end of like figuring out where does this live, who wants to see this where. I think that's the distribution part is nearly as important as the content itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And please make them different. This is something that has changed in the last 6 months. That's the thing about social media. Once you feel like you've got it down, just forget it. It's going to change. I see a lot of brands doing this. They'll make a TikTok and take that TikTok video and put it on Reels and then put it on YouTube Shorts and put it on Pinterest or wherever their audience is. TikTok will actually ding you for that. They will show your content to less people as if their AI bots sense that that is duplicate content. Either an influencer has created that content and you've reposted it, or you've posted it on Instagram, and Instagram, Adam Mosseri, who is the lead over at Instagram, has said, if we see it's duplicate content, we will suppress it. So I love what Kevin said about it's kind of a spoke model. Create one piece and make it native to each platform. But please, 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 that's something that's relatively new in this space. Don't just create it once and put it in multiple places just like that. For example, if you're going to put it in TikTok and in Reels, use the native text function in TikTok and the native text function in Reels and make them slightly different, right?
Yep.
That's, again, not recreating the wheel or anything, just make it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And actually, we have a question from Sean, which I think is a good one. Do you repost evergreen content on social media again in the future? Like, can you repost the same thing, like, let's say once or twice a year?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the way to think about this is not everyone will see it the first time. And, you know, by the time a year passes, you've probably grown your following, you've grown your audience, and there are people where your content can add value to them. And so, yes, some people may have seen it, which is fine. Like, they're probably your loyal fans and they probably are happy seeing it again too. But there's a whole new set of people that probably never saw it. So actually, you don't really need that much content. You just need like a certain amount, and then you just kind of go. And then obviously reacting to trends and whatever new, you know, is in the market and all that good stuff. That's always important. But yeah, evergreen content it's evergreen for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely. Omar, thank you for that input. Actually, I think we should turn it over to you, Omar. So unless you had something else to say about on this topic, Omar, I was going to kind of shift a bit from talking about brand to talking about product. So
Zoom just quit on me, so that was awesome. I didn't really hear your lead in, but do I have a comment on what was just said?
Yeah, just if you want to add
question?
anything about that, or before we kind of transition a bit.
This topic, these two, Carmen and Kevin, know way more about any of this stuff than I do. But it made me think about this book that I remember reading years ago. This guy came and spoke at LinkedIn. He's a Wharton professor. The book was Contagious, just about like what makes things go viral. I forget the guy's name. It's basically what you guys said, and it's one of those books that could just be a blog post, but it's you might check that out. I also just wanted to say on the LinkedIn front that I'm a big proponent of that. I think you can get I agree with Kevin's take that organic posting doesn't do anything. LinkedIn's own statistics, where I worked, by the way, will tell you that, hey, you get on average one view of your company page, which, by the way, you should all have, with a status update, sort of a post that you make, right? Which is a very sketchy metric and really not that valuable. What is valuable, though expensive, is creating targeted campaigns. I think that the in-mail campaigns work really well, but you have to usually have some money, unless you're bidding for an audience that's kind of underserved and not that costly. But I think that tends to work really well. The other plug I will make about LinkedIn is that if you are thinking about how do you burnish your own professional brand and presence, because that is inextricably linked to your product or service that you're selling, right? Is that I wrote a book on how to do that on LinkedIn. So I just wanted to plug that, and I'll put in the URL here.
Thank you.
If you guys are kind enough to write a review of it, I will give you a personal LinkedIn profile review and also maybe your company page. Okay, so that was just my crazy commentary in response to all of that amazing content. So ask me whatever you actually want to ask.
Okay, perfect. That was I love that. I want more craziness from you, like throughout the rest of this panel. That was fantastic.
You careful what you're asking.
So let's talk a little bit, Omar, since you're, really our tech and product guy in the room, about how to think about product marketing versus brand marketing. Since I know we have some people here that are more working in that tech kind of capacity, like how do you really define or differentiate one from the other?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just frame that by saying, first of all, I'm really excited to hear from Laura. I think in general, I look for things and like people who've been sort of in the weeds of marketing as a discipline, look for things that you can get, big ROI with minimal spend or effort, right? And I think for a lot of startups, no matter the sort of stage you're at, marketing per se, as a discipline, as a function, as a trade-off, as a thing you hire for, can be a little bit of an afterthought, right?
Mhm.
You're focused on building your product or service. You're focused on building your client base. You're focused on not losing them, right? And fundraising and all the things that happen. So my argument would be, given that I've been in these roles in tech companies, and granted much bigger in some respects, just as scrappy, but there is a marketing apparatus that can be plugged into. I would say, think about adding a product marketer or a product marketing focus fairly early in your growth, because for me, that function, as differentiated from maybe brand, is where you get a lot of connective power and bang for the buck, as I was saying, ROI, because they're like the glue, right? If you have a really good flexible product marketer, they're digging in on what your product or service is, understanding how that resonates with your target audience or audiences, helping you prioritize those things and segment, right? All that really good marketing stuff. But if they're really good, they're not just limited to that. And they're definitely not just talking about speeds and feeds, when it comes to the product itself. They're able to be truly full funnel, right? So they're working on top of funnel stuff with PR, thought leadership, getting sort of cutting through the clutters, all the branding stuff that we're talking about. That stuff is really hard, right? But if you can get, again, bang for your buck with, a really great PR hit, or, by the way, I just have to say, I'm a hardcore email fan. We haven't talked about that, and I'm old school, perhaps. You can see a little bit of the white here, but I love, oh, and definitely in the chin. I love email because I think a lot of people are forgetting about this. Oh, and by the way, I should also say, if you went to this site that I just put in the URL in the chat, I'm also, I'm a founder. So I have my own business working with job seekers on how to use LinkedIn to take, get 10 steps ahead in their career. And I work primarily, it's primarily a B2B business. We have direct to consumer, but primarily we're working with other business schools and clients like that. And so what have we done that has jet fueled our business? And by the way, the two of us started the student and college team at LinkedIn. We're both product marketers. The thing that we've done is we've done two things that have really helped. One is built an amazing 50,000 person email list, right? Mm-hmm. That we can tap for every new product or service offering that we're layering on, that we can, sell the book to, that we can add this little module to a course and get them to pay for. Mm-hmm. But also just give them freebies to keep them interested and not opting out, right? So building that robust email list, I think, is worth it over time. And that's just like default people opting in, popping them up with things that they actually value as premium content when they're on your site, et cetera. But the other thing we've done is selectively produced content that we've been able to syndicate, right? So again, I'm excited to hear from the PR maven, but when you can get those big fell swoop hits, I just think it's worth it. You guys are crazy. You're running around trying to do a million different things. How can you possibly invest in brand and, like brand building? Because the reality is that people pick up on the scraps of your brand that they happen upon, right? How can you make sure you're producing the most perfect, virally optimized TikTok video? I commend all of you B2C businesses that have to do that and are doing that at early stages in your growth. And nowadays you probably do have to do that. But I just want to be the guy here that says, hey, don't forget about email. Don't forget about content marketing. Don't forget about thought leadership. Don't forget about ways that you can sort of convey an expertise and give free stuff to people that you want to ultimately sell stuff to in that freemium model, because that is what's worked for our business. It's also what tech companies really focus on. So think about product marketing as differentiated from maybe some of these higher funnel things as full funnel and full channel. And again, if they're really good, they are glue. They're not only able to create campaigns that are across that funnel and create and across channels. They're also able to dig in on product, right? They know, they get really close to the customers. They apply that, design thinking attitude, that approach, and can really get close and say an informed development of said product, right? That's what you really want, is somebody who gets in there and says, why are we prioritizing this feature over this feature? It doesn't really I don't think we're getting a strong signal from the customer to tell us that that's the direction we should go, right? A good product marketer can do that. And then the final thing is a good product marketer can really be that bridge from sales. So oftentimes early in your growth of your businesses, you're hiring like a technical co-founder if it's a tech company, and or sales, because you have to go sell. And I would say like a good product marketer can sort of bridge a lot of those different worlds, and do sales enablement and almost be like a frontline salesperson in many ways. It's a great 1-2 punch when you can have somebody come in and say, here's what the benefit of what we're offering is to you, speaking your language as a customer, and then have a salesperson who knows that sales methodology to just come in and close, right? But you want to establish your credibility without being super salesy. And for all those reasons, I think product marketing is a really invaluable thing to be thinking about, not too late in your evolution, but also understand it's not really something that is probably like top of mind for a lot of you. And I think it should be. By the way, product marketing is like this weird sort of synonymous thing in the tech world with, brand management and brand marketing in the CPG world and other verticals. So think of them as similar if you know what those functions do.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Omar. That was great. Definitely hitting on some hot topics because we're getting some great questions in the chat. I am going to come back to those. So thank you, everyone. But I do want to turn it over to Laura for a second because we haven't yet talked about this amazing hot topic, which everyone always wants to know about, which is PR and how do I get press? So Laura, it's that question that everyone wants to know, which is how do I get that big press hit? How do I make that happen? Do I need to hire an agency like you? Can I do it myself? What's the deal?
Yeah, absolutely. So PR is really about storytelling, the same way we've been talking about social media and creating content there that speaks to authenticity and who you are as a company. So when it comes to PR, what we spend our days doing is interacting with journalists and bringing ideas to them. So those ideas are from our clients. Some of them may be more evergreen angles about just the background of the company and who the founder is. And some of them are more timely angles, like a product launch or a restaurant opening or an event that they're throwing. So journalists have interest in covering both of those things, and they're both worth pitching. But the idea is to spark up a larger conversation with a journalist that will turn into an article or a broadcast segment. So we're after editorial coverage, not any advertising or paid coverage specifically in the PR world that I'm in. But you, first of all, should educate yourself about what people are writing and talking about across media platforms in your industry. So think about magazines, newspapers, TV, radio, email newsletters, and take note of what writers are covering which trends and how your business could fit into their storylines and the topics that they're covering. Because a journalist is going to be a lot more likely to respond to your pitch if it's clear that you've done your research. And then I would definitely suggest building a PR toolkit. So just putting together a digital folder with handy information for media that includes background on your company or product and a photo database that they can reference with imagery and pull for any coverage that they end up doing. So I would say first ask yourself PR related questions like, what makes this story interesting? How are you different from other competitors in your space? Are there other products like it in the market? Are you part of a certain trend that people are really talking about right now? And then put those key points down on paper along with a brief description of your company in general. And that's really the framework for a pitch. And definitely think about making your pitch visually interesting as well. So include a few eye-catching photos, helps tell your story, and also makes it easy for the writer if he or she's looking for photos to include in their article. And then research in advance what that reporter has covered before. Many writers today are freelance journalists, and they have their own websites that typically include contact information about how to get in touch with them. And then another thing that you can be doing if you're looking to do your own PR is writing press releases. So while a pitch is really something that you tailor more to an individual writer, a press release is about a certain announcement that you are designing to send out to multiple people at once. So you're going to need to develop a media list in order to get your press release out. So I keep these in Excel and include notes about, different articles that journalists have done recently, topics that they cover, magazines that they may be used to write at and have now moved on to a different media outlet. And then you can put together an email that goes out to all of the people on your media list with your press release. And I would say, don't blindly include long lists of media. When you're sending these out, do your research in advance to be sure that anyone that you're contacting does cover a topic that's relevant to what you're announcing. And don't get discouraged if you don't hear back. It's often the case that journalists will receive a pitch or a release and they'll keep it in their back pocket and then come back to you months later when they might be working on a relevant story. And then to your question about, when do I hire someone? This is time consuming, very time consuming. It is something that a lot of founders or, internal marketing coordinators don't have the time to be doing. And on top of the time element, we do spend all day, every day developing relationships with journalists so that they are coming to us when they're working on a specific story that they know our clients might be a good fit for. So I would say if you're running into a time issue, if you need the expertise of a publicist who, knows how to talk to media and what they're looking for, those are both good reasons to hire a PR firm. And then along with the contact lists and connections that they have in the media industry.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was like a crash course in PR in like 3 minutes. That was amazing. That's actually, we have a question from Tom in the audience that relates to that. What you mentioned, what I think is so important about building relationships. I think that's something people don't realize about PR. And what you mentioned is that it might not be now, but it can happen later. Like I've had this experience too, where we do PR for some of our clients and pitched a New York Times reporter in food, Florence Fabricant, a product. And she was like, that's not for me. Kept following up with other products. And eventually she did cover one of them and it was like fantastic. So it's like, you have to realize that sometimes it's literally not a fit, but it's not about that one pitch. It's about that relationship over time. So Thomas's question, so he's in the financial advisory space and is curious about if your goal is to get like a regular spot on like a CNBC, a show, maybe a podcast, maybe a column. I think this could extend to other things. Like, how do you even start with that? Like, what is the strategy there?
Well, I think there are two main tactics to follow if that is a goal of yours. So I think that one of them is developing a relationship with the network. So starting to stay in touch with different producers who, again, almost every journalist has contact information online these days. We subscribe to PR software that allows us to pull contact information for many journalists at one time. But if you do your research, you can typically Google and find someone's email contact info at any news station or magazine. A lot of newspapers include email addresses at the bottom of articles so that you can reach out to the writer if you have a comment or a question about something that you read. So I would say, first of all, start just developing a relationship with them, which does not necessarily mean, hey, let's go get coffee. It can even just mean keeping them aware of what you have going on as a company and any sort of news that you think they might find exciting. So I would reach out, introduce yourself, and follow up with them when you have something press-worthy that you think they may be interested in. So that's the first thing that I would do. And then I would say, research who they have on air regularly and what are they bringing to the table and what sort of niche can you fill. You might notice that they aren't talking about XYZ topic and you're really an expert on that topic and you think that you could really add value in that way. So I think that after you sort of introduce yourself and develop a relationship by, sharing news with them, at that point, you can express interest in the possibility of appearing on air regularly. And be very explicit about what you would bring to the table. And again, you never know, they might say no at that time, but you might hear from them in a year that now, you know, someone who was working on the network appearing regularly is no longer there, and they want to start having someone come in more regularly from a company like yours. So just keep in mind the long game. It's definitely a marathon and not a sprint. And I think especially in that instance, you really want to be demonstrating, you know, your thought leadership and your expertise in a certain area that you think could be beneficial to them. And one thing I would definitely say is, if you do want to develop a great relationship with a reporter, be very responsive to them. Especially if you're someone who wants to have this ongoing relationship where you're appearing regularly on their media outlet. If you get a question from them, they're interested in covering you, but, oh, hey, I need a few more days on their deadline, that really puts them in a tough spot. So, do what you can to make their job easy, get them the information that they need, and, try to be succinct and clear. And if they need photos or they need quotes, get it over to them before their deadline.
Absolutely. Such great points. Thank you so much, Laura. Actually, that's a really good transition to a question that interestingly has come up both now from Diana and also previously in the questions that we received before from James Dix, which is basically this question of, should the founder be the center? And this is a question for everyone, actually. Should the founder or CEO be the center of the brand and of the, all of those kind of outbound, or inbound really marketing opportunities? Or should it be more about your brand itself, like disconnected from you as a founder, as a person? What is everyone's thoughts about that?
I'll chime in if you don't mind.
Yeah.
One just quick thing I would say is, I think that one of the first things you should think about is this person someone who wants to be public facing? So if you're not comfortable, speaking on camera or public speaking or being, the face behind social media, then maybe you're not the founder that's going to be, front and center all the time in the press and on social media. Maybe it's going to be more about the company, but I would definitely think of that first. And if you are someone who's very comfortable being public facing, absolutely, I think having the founder so that there's a face behind the brand is really important. And you can be that person who's kind of showing the day-to-day and connecting with people on a personal level, as opposed to just the brand itself.
Awesome. Thank you. Kevin, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will say, as someone who doesn't want to be public facing but should be, I'll take the slightly adjacent stance here and say, I think in today's day and age, you as a founder, more often than not, should be public facing. But the way that your personal brand is should be complementary or adjacent to what you're building. So for example, obviously with Lunar, what we're building, it's something that's very personal to me. So that content comes very naturally, and it's easy to associate the content I put out personally with, the brand. But I'll give you maybe like, let's say I'm one day far in the future, I acquire someone's eraser business. I don't know, something that I don't really care about, right? Like, I actually don't give a shit about it personally, but whatever, let's just pretend I bought this business and I want to grow it, right? Actually, I can see a world where I would continue making content that's about, like, from a personal brand perspective, about what I'm doing, right? I would build in public. I'd probably say something like, I've just acquired a eraser company for X, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build in public and show everyone what I'm doing in my journey, which is also valuable content to a lot of people, and that can then translate into building that business directly, right? And so there's always ways, I think, like the entrepreneurial journey in essence is something that is so endlessly fascinating to everyone. And it's something that will always inspire, and like that, I think, is inherently worth sharing. So to me, that's just like additional growth hack on your building business. But to Laura's point, if that's just something that you're not cool with, that's totally fine. You can build a business in a million other ways. I just think it's, it's there for the taking if you want to get the low-hanging fruit.
It's a good way of putting it. Yeah. Yeah. And actually, I realized, Diana, I kind of misread your question, but this is also a good segue about this. So on LinkedIn in particular, and again, this is a question for any panelist that has a thought about this. What about, should your content be coming from you when you post it on LinkedIn, or from your company page? Or is it, again, the same thing where you adapt it to both, or you think about what you post in a bit of a different way?
I think people just like seeing faces. these days.
yeah.
That being said, I am like B2C. I'm in a consumer good, so people love seeing that.
Sure.
Like, if I was building, I don't know, something like a link, like if I was the founder of LinkedIn, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah. Any
I
other?
don't think, I think there's a little bit of an arbitrary distinction. I think it also depends the business that you're in, right? If you're selling a service that is inextricably connected to you, you need to build your own sort of bona fides, right? I think if you are, you know, a little bit more of a, like if you're Kevin, it's great to have to put your, you know, your passionate face on that, but it is a lot about the product, right? As a B2C company, and thus you need to have that property as a company page. That's the thing you promote and post from. But it also depends on the type of content that you're trying to get across, right? If you want to tell a personal story about why the, you know, the Pan-Asian cultural connection of the product is what inspired you to start it, like that has to come from you, Kevin, right? So it's the classic "it depends" answer to this question.
Yeah. Well, and of course you can also, which I often do, like post something to the company page and then repost it to your personal page and add like your personal touch to it. And that's great too, because then you can get any other employees or people in the company or just kind of like friends or like people you tap as like your brand ambassadors to kind of just do the same thing and all add their 2 cents. Like, again, it can kind of all be orchestrated. It just doesn't appear to be orchestrated, which I think is something people do not realize. But that's often what's most effective, you know, to just get stuff done. Awesome. So let's turn it over. I know I have a few questions like building up in the chat here. Well, actually one question that I did want to get in before going to some of these is just about like tools and platforms. So has there been anything that all 4 of you, well, each of you has found helpful in terms of tools, like maybe it's for social media posting or analytics or you know, for email, like best email platform or CRM or, you know, managing or finding influencers. Like there's been some, you know, buzz in the chat about Muckrack as a, you know, a tool for gathering PR and getting in touch with journalists. Like, what are the tools that each of your platforms have found the most useful in like any aspect really of marketing?
I can start with that. So if you're
Yeah,
creating content, Canva, CANVA, they should pay me. Like I speak at every conference about them. I design my presentations with Canva.
Right.
So they have video capabilities. They've just announced a whole bunch of other capabilities in their suite of products. And they started where all entrepreneurs start, right? And so they've been on this journey and they understand it.
Yeah.
So that's for creating content. As a social media person, I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I don't particularly like social media tools for understanding what's performing on social media. And when you connect with the API, which is what these tools do, into these platforms, there's something that's missing. But you can find out how your Instagram posts are doing as long as your post is a business post on Instagram. You have the metrics there at your fingertips. The same with TikTok, the same with Twitter. I think that you could save yourself some money and go straight to the source of truth because they are selling advertising based on their numbers. And so I think that that's probably the best source of truth to go to. So you don't have to invest a ton of money up front. And I realize, I just want to say this, that there are lots of stages to the build your own business journey. And some are, you know, a team of 1, then you have a team of 5, and then you get bigger and bigger. And then, you know, like Kevin, you're blowing it out of the water and everybody wants a piece of your time. But if you're starting out and you're thinking about what you spend money on, use the tools that are native to you. And then as you grow, you can take a look at other tools.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
I've got one tool that I think
Yeah.
that I'll bet most people don't know here, and I think it's like a growth hack. It's called, I'm gonna drop the link in chat right now, but basically this company, they hire very smart, you know, college students and postgrads to just do work for you. And so I use them for things like data collection, for gathering influencers, and I'll tell them, hey, can you give me a list of 200 influencers with more than X followers that post Y in Y content niches? Or even I'll be like, can you find me 10 investors that invest in whatever category? Or can you find me the top 50 restaurants in New York that should be carrying Lunar
Mhm.
that serve this kind of cuisine and have a liquor license. And that just saves so much time. So anyways,
That's amazing. That's fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. Laura, anything from your end, like in terms of, because there's been some talk about this in the chat, like what would you recommend that early stage companies or startups think, any tools that are useful besides like old fashioned research?
Yeah, no, for sure. So Cision is definitely my favorite database for finding journalist contact info. So I'd mention that one. And then if you are at a stage as a company where you want to pay a platform to monitor your press for you so that you're not, Googling your name every day or setting up Google alerts, you can use something called Meltwater. We are using a new platform called Critical Mention that is great for small businesses. And then probably my favorite tool is Streak. I love that you can see who has opened your emails. It has a little eyeball that will turn orange if someone has seen it, which is really helpful in PR because there's a lot of follow-up. And then also you can use it if you need to email a lot of people at the same time. So we use it for that as well. And then email, we use MailChimp. We help a lot of restaurants that we represent with email newsletters for their customers. Love MailChimp. And what else? Those are the main ones that come to mind.
I did not
Awesome.
pay Laura to call out an Intuit product. I just wanted to point that out.
Good, yeah, that would
But thank you for keeping me employed. I appreciate it.
Amazing. Omar, how about you? What would you recommend from all your time with email so many different channels?
Yeah, I mean, these are like, this space is so dynamic, and my last job was running $100 million business line. So I actually wasn't doing marketing, and it's crazy. I'm writing down these suggestions because in that span of 3.5 years, like everything's changed. I will say, like, the platforms that we used in larger tech companies or, that were invaluable were things like Salesforce, your CRM tool. By the way, if you have like a nonprofit status or a social enterprise, you can get 10 free licenses for that. Marketing Cloud, those kinds of platforms. I was going to ask how people feel about sort of the newsletter thing, if that's still a thing.
That is a really good question. I have an opinion about that personally. I mean, I think that, well, of course, again, it does depend, I think, on every company, and it's always interesting to me. I subscribe to a lot of email lists to see what people are doing. Some people really go for that newsletter type approach, and they're sending those types of emails all the time. I feel like, in my experience anyway, having emails that are much more concise about one topic with one call to action perform better, because I think people get too many newsletters, and also there's just too many choices. It's kind of like, you're like, okay, that's interesting, but no. I think sometimes like that approach can work at some point in the funnel when it's not so much a newsletter, but it's more like a 10 reasons to come back, or 7 ways that users are using XYZ with photos, right? Like you can have like different types of like a kind of choose your own adventure type of content, but like not in that kind of newsletter, like here's what's going on, like type of way. Because again, I don't know, it just seems like we all get there's just too much out there. And so when you can be more focused about it, I found in my experience anyway, that it seems to work better. But I'm curious about what other people think about that too. No thoughts? Well, I guess everyone agrees with me. We're just going to go with that. Thanks. John seconds that. I appreciate it. All right. I'm going to try and get through some of these other questions in the chat here. Oh, this was a good one from Ben. So how do you think about email marketing? Or are there ways you think differently about email marketing in a B2B versus a B2C context? So maybe, Omar, do you have any thoughts about that first, like thinking specifically about email?
Yeah, I mean, I put a bunch of thoughts in the chat in general on email,
Yes.
but I think, look, I worked at places where like it was just optimized like to the point where it's like a lot of, honestly, the creativity is even like taken out of it. If you fill the funnel with X number of recipients. Out the bottom of the funnel, you're going to get Y customers. And it's kind of, at least in a B2B context, is kind of that, that's the goal, right? That's the holy grail, to get to that point where you know that, and thus, you know, you're going to get positive ROI on anything you spend. So I, you know, other than that, like B2C, I've done a little bit of, in, you know, my earlier part of my career, and that stuff scares me. It's so hard. We made a big pivot with our startup to go from a B2C business to B2B, because it just feels like you got to spend so much money to be relevant. And that's where I think, if you're in that line of work, a lot of the strategies we're talking about today around branding, PR, social are probably more important, frankly, than email.
Yeah, well, I also would say, I don't know how much anyone else has used this, but I think SMS is actually something we're going to see a lot more of. I mean, I'm personally getting more of it, and I think it's becoming, because there's, you know, there are tools like Klaviyo as a CRM that, an email and SMS marketing tool that allows you to, especially good for like e-commerce businesses that really all of their businesses around getting people to buy stuff online, where you have to have a very sophisticated funnel, and SMS can be a really good complement to email, as again, people are getting way too many emails. So if you think about it, you have that kind of e-commerce business, or even something like let's say events based, or even if you are retail kind of, or anything like a tech company, you have a product drop, right? Like, to have that be timed at the, you know, creatively and at the right time, where like, you know, you have someone get, like, as an example, I just, for a client who has like a supplements company and it's like energy boosting, right? We said, okay, send an SMS at 3 p.m. when people are getting tired, to be like, hey, beat that, you know, afternoon energy slump. You know, this is a great way to do it. 5 stars, this reviewer said X, link, you know, 15% off, like, done, you know. That can be a really interesting tool that I think is not exploited enough. So
yeah, that's an interesting point. And obviously social has the same thing in terms of like timing of posts and things. But I, real quick, one other thing I just wanted to add on the B2B versus B2C thing that that I'm like, because you made me think of it when you were talking about, you know, some of these other channels, as we do shift to a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about today. You know, I've noticed one of the recommendations for, if you're in a B2B business, was, you know, like, look at some of the lists that you can buy, and even for B2C, and for, you know, mailables. And oftentimes I've noticed, like, a lot of it is just about scrap. Like, you're finding people who go to like these conferences that might be your niche audience and titles you want to target and things. And a lot of these places are willing to give you all of their information except for emails, right? So emails are like still this coveted thing in a lot of circles, but you can use that to cut through the clutter, because that also means that they're not, you know, they know email is sort of, they're inundated with it. It's a little bit overwhelming. Why don't you, you know, send them some direct mail? We're just talking about like ways to cut through the clutter. I think events can be one, direct mail, some of these, like, because everything has shifted so much in the other direction. I started my job, just like Carmen, at AOL, in the department, and you guys don't even know what that is, in the department that mailed CD-ROMs, physical CDs, all over the country. 22 million of them we would mail every month. And like, that sounds ridiculous, but now, you know, what's old is new. So anyway, try stuff like that, because I think buying addresses is way cheaper.
Yeah, that's a great point about like exploiting some of those other tactics that we haven't even touched on, that might be a little bit inside, you know, outside the box, because again, we are all on our phones all the time, right? We actually had a question about podcasts in the chat, and I don't know how much work this gang has done on podcasts, but so Jack is wondering if there are any general podcasting advice from a product marketing perspective. So he says, on top of other social media lines, I'm looking to leverage an educational / entertaining podcast to launch my olive oil brand. So any thoughts about that, about using podcasts for marketing?
I have done a few podcasts, and sorry about that, a few podcasts over my career. And it I forget who says it earlier. Every answer that a social media person gives you is always, it depends. right? There's never a yes or no answer. It's the most frustrating thing about talking to social media people. But I would suggest that you crawl, walk, run, right? Like invest in channels that are easier. It's podcast is not if you build it, they will come. Everything requires some marketing engine behind it. So you're going to be using social anyway to drive people to the podcast. So possibly take that content. I mean, TikTok allows you to do 10-minute TikToks now, and people are finding success with that. I have a friend in a similar business who is starting his own tequila company, and he just does 10-minute TikToks on what he thinks of each tequila and, you know, the flavors and the notes and all that good stuff that goes into the tequila. So I think I would steer away from podcasts until you know, grown into that space, only because you're then adding work to get people to the podcast. So you're going to have to go through that first tunnel anyway, start with that content in that tunnel in the social media space. And then if there's a huge demand, you can move into the podcast space.
If your podcast is about, I don't know, educational content about Italy, by all means, like that sounds perfect. So it really depends. I've sponsored a few podcasts. I've done a few. Generally, they haven't done great, like in terms of ROI. So maybe it's like, I would say probably I haven't picked the right ones. Probably our call to action isn't right. Also, like it's hard to measure our ROI. Like, think about your audience, right? When are you listening to a podcast? Why? When I'm driving, when I'm in transit, on the subway. Like I'm not right then and there ready to, like, I'm thirsting for some hard seltzer. Like it's probably not, like I'm not really listening to podcasts on the way to a party. So like, thinking about your audience, your channel, kind of when and where that's all happening is important.
Yeah, that's so true. It's funny. I listen to like forensic files, like I like to like true crime. And I think it's so smart. There's like a home security company that advertises on forensic files. Well, that's perfect. Like it makes total sense because it's a time when people are feeling fearful, right? Like it's funny. It's like things that you might not be the first connection when you're like, what should we advertise? Like, the home security people, when they're like, oh, maybe podcasts, I don't know. And like whoever was like forensic files, like that was brilliant. It's like, you kind of have to think in that way. So, and that's a great point. Awesome. So I know we are getting near the end of our time, this is totally flown by, but I'm so grateful to everyone, all your energy and just all of this incredibly invaluable insight. I know we could have like probably just gone on and on like this. So I really, really appreciate it. So, okay, questions still coming into the chat. Yeah, if anyone has like any super quick, like last questions that they want to pop in, like while we have everyone, and then, panelists can either answer just over the chat as they've been doing, which is great. So now the chat is super rich, or we can ask them live. Feel free to pop them in. But yeah, if people are, writing any last questions in, I'll just kind of close out. So if you want to find out about future events like this, if you're already, on one of the lists that you've gotten this, then great. If you want to be on my and Anthony's kind of our own email list for Who's in Entrepreneurship specific events, just shoot me an email. I'll put my email in the chat. I'll add you to that and you can find out about anything coming up. We might be doing an in-person event in New York in November, so stay tuned for anything about that. And of course, there is the UVA holiday party in December. In New York, which is always super fun. So if you're in New York, you should go to that. And we will continue December 1st. Thank you, Lydia. We will continue to be planning virtual events on a bunch of different topics. So definitely make sure that you are on, either the Virginia Club list or my list. And we also have a LinkedIn group too, so you can connect with me and join. Also, feel free to connect with anyone who's been on this panel. I know everyone's always Who's are always happy to help Who's, which is one of the, really the best things about being part of this community. I think that was it. I'm trying to think if I neglected to mention everything, but oh yeah, you'll get the recording. You'll also get a very brief survey from the Office of Engagement, just 4 questions. So if you don't mind filling that out, that would be great. It really helps us tailor programming. And if you have any other feedback or thoughts, feel free to email me or Anthony as well. We always love hearing from you about what you liked, about what you might want to see in the future from Who's in Entrepreneurship. So with that, thank you so much, Laura, Kevin, Carmen, and Omar. Your insights and your time have been just so helpful, and we really, really appreciate it. So thank you all so much for being here. It's been such a great discussion. And thank you all so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Really appreciate coming. Thank you for everything, Allison and panelists.
I feel like we need to sing the good old song or something. I don't know.
You want to start that?